Manchester, Hooksett Auburn. This is the Wednesday, October 18th. We've transited to the last half of October.
Here we are.
And a beautiful day it was.
Tick-tock,
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Can't believe it.
The time is coming. The leaves are changing. It's
They
a
sure
beautiful
are.
time.
Yeah, those cold nights will do it.
And those cold nights will do it. And we are here tonight to, Mike Farley and I, to hope to engage you at 640-3091 if you want to call in, because we want to talk tonight about what's going on with the health care program we have existing in the United States of America today, often called Obamacare, but I think we should probably refer to it by its proper title, the Affordable Care Act.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Trump care. Pretty much that's what it is now, isn't
I think Trump destruction would be the name.
Trump don't care.
You know, we've had many years of experience with the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. It has, I think, achieved a lot for the citizens of the United States and this state. Emergency room visits are down. Uninsured members of the public are down. People can have their pre-existing conditions covered. There's programs to provide, for people on individual market exchanges. There's Medicaid expansion, which is now providing coverage to almost 50,000 New Hampshire granite staters who no longer have to meet a separate qualification other than certain income limits to get health care. All of this has been put at risk by our president, Mr. Trump.
He's not alone.
He's not alone. He's not alone. A lot of people of his party, which he likes to now seem to delight in attacking that party, but they are seeing, will this be death by 1,000 cuts for this affordable health care? That's what he's claiming. And we want to talk about that tonight, the implications of that for our citizens of New Hampshire. And we've heard a lot about the possible grave implications for the country at large, but we're concerned about the citizens of New Hampshire, depending on the Medicaid expansion, depending on the funding for, part of our response to the opioid crisis, depending on people who do not have group insurance opportunities to purchase insurance through the market exchange. All these things we want to talk about, and we are very pleased to have two fine guests to do that with us. We have Viola from Granite State Organizing. Tell us your last name, Viola, because I'll get it wrong.
I'm Viola Katsime.
From the Granite State Organizing Project, and this is part of your agenda for the Granite State Organizing Project.
Yes, the Granite State Organizing Project, which is the largest grassroots organization in New Hampshire, has been working on healthcare from the very beginning, and we are continuing to defend the Affordable Care Act to make sure that the families that we represent in New Hampshire have healthcare that they need. So that's why I'm here today.
Well, thank you for joining us. We're pleased to have you. And Zandra, tell us, you've been here before, but it's been a long time.
Yes.
So introduce yourself again to our audience.
Thank you for having me back. Xander Rice Hawkins with Granite State Progress and Granite State Progress Education Fund. We have worked on health reform for a number of years. First, working to help make sure that a president made it a priority. Barack Obama did that when he became president, signed into law the Affordable Care Act after many, many months of debate and discussion about what that should look like. We have seen an impact of millions more Americans having access to quality, affordable health care through that. And we've had a lot of discussion over the years about tweaks and fixes that we can do to improve upon that act even further. And I think what you're seeing now, unfortunately, with the Trump administration and some other congressional Republicans, is an attempt to roll back what has been an incredibly successful program in increasing access to health care coverage. And so tonight we'll talk a little bit about what some of those attempted rollbacks have been, which the American people have resoundingly rejected, which has been great, but some of the other ways that they're trying to sabotage the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah. Mike, I forgot about you. You have
I'm easily forgettable, Bob.
Well,
That's not a surprise.
Not at all true, but we always look forward to your POTUS report on the progress report. Do you want to do that now?
Well, I was actually hoping I might get away with it, sliding free on this one, but I do have a couple things that I'd like to just bring up really quickly at the top of the show, and this is a regular feature we've been doing every week, folks. Since the inauguration, the POTUS report, we have a new president. Donald Trump is technically the president of the United States, and this week, a few bits of reporting attracted my attention. I usually try to go after things that aren't overly reported, but these two things were pretty big. So maybe we can discuss them later on in the show. But the first one has to do with this enormous expose. Bob, you talked about the opioid crisis in your intro. The expose that was on 60 Minutes last weekend, and the future.
Which I did not see. Did you watch that?
I did not watch it, but I've read the reporting on it, and there was a. I knew I'd get caught on this. I forget what the paper is, if it was the New York Times or the Post, the Washington Post, I'm not sure. But I read an article basically reiterating it. But the bottom line of the situation is that we had a law in place that gave to the DEA the ability to investigate even what might otherwise appear to be legitimate drug operations, drug distribution centers, pain clinics. You might have heard of these things, pain clinics. And in certain instances, when those were not operating on the up and up, but rather were being used as shells to divert, is the term used. In other words, take legal prescription medications and get them out on the street. What this does is pharmaceutical companies get paid. More pills on the street, those pills get bought, and then the distributors are distributing them. So there was a 2-year effort, we now know, spearheaded by the pharmaceutical industry and 3 large distributing companies in particular. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in lobbying dollars spent on this. The bill was actually written by a pharmaceutical industry lawyer lobbyist. They handed you've seen ALEC does this model legislation.
Yeah.
And basically it was shepherded through the Congress and passed the Senate on a voice vote. And President Barack Obama signed it. We have to be clear. He is involved in this. He signed this bill. But it defanged the ability of the DEA to go after these opiate distribution companies when they were acting nefariously. And there's no doubt that there is a large industry that is diverting these pain pills onto the street. They're being overprescribed. That's one problem, but this is direct diversion. We have the report indicated that there were some deliveries to these locations of, let's say, I'm going to make up numbers, but in a community that may have 1 million people, 9 million pills would be delivered. Ridiculous numbers. And they were going to these pain clinics, and these pain clinics were just writing these prescriptions, people using their insurance, filling these prescriptions when it was not really for the best medical reasons. And we know what that leads to. What that leads to is when you can no longer get the prescription, you can get the heroin. And that's what that leads to. And we're fighting that right now.
Yeah,
so,
we sure are.
I'm taking too long, but the reason I bring it up is because the congressman who shepherded that bill to help fuel the opioid crisis in our country was nominated by President Trump to be the drug czar.
How about
whose
that?
job is.
Well, he knows his drugs.
He spent 2 years working very hard to promote drug use in America.
Yeah.
He has removed his name from consideration. I don't think that there was any other outcome that could be conceivable. So that's an issue that people should pay attention to. It goes to his judgment, goes to whether he's vetting his candidates, not to mention he's got all these open positions. Second topic I wanted to bring up very quickly is what I think is a real down in the gutter issue that is coming up, and it just seems to have legs. It's not going away. And that is when President Trump, in response to a question about why he hadn't made a public statement, not a call to the families, a public statement about the deaths of 4 military personnel in, of all places, Niger. What are we doing in Niger? But that's another story.
That's the Sahara Desert, folks.
In response to that question, he chose to attempt to aggrandize himself by taking down President Obama and other of his predecessors, claiming that he makes phone calls to Gold Star families where they did not. The fact of the matter is, sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. It is an occasional thing and kind of an ad hoc thing, and it has been traditionally. But he has kept this up in a Twitter fight. He dragged the son of his chief of staff into this.
Who died in Afghanistan some years ago.
And it just keeps going and going and going. And now we hear, now remember, he brought this up, now we hear that in a conversation with the Gold Star family last year, he promised to send them a check for $25,000 and never sent it. I hear today it has been sent, so that must be today that the check went out. And we also hear that as recently as earlier this week, when he did, thumping his chest and proud that he did it, when he did call one of the widows of one of these fallen soldiers, he had the temerity to say, well, he knew what he was signing up for. Yeah. And I understand from the mother, who I just saw interviewed today, of that soldier, he did not remember his name.
Oh my gosh.
His name was Etienne Murphy. So I'm going to leave that. It's a long POTUS report, but we'll get on to bigger and better things. But we have a president that is getting worse by the minute, and it's moving away from policy into just personal interaction, familiarity with the English language, and ability to communicate with people. And don't forget, when the President of the United States is calling these Gold Star families, he's calling on behalf of you and me and you. He's representing us. Yeah. And our condolence to those families. This isn't his conversation, and he's got to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I do go on.
You do go on.
That's the POTUS report for this week, folks.
Okay, well, that was well done, Mike, as always. But we want to get back to the issue of health care with our two excellent guests, Viola and Xandra. And here's what I want to start with, I think, ladies. You know, the President Obama, don't I wish, Trump, has said again and again that the healthcare system is failing. It's almost dead. So I guess
use the term death spiral.
Death spiral.
Which is a technical economic term that he does not understand apparently.
Well, right. But, you know, I mean, is the Affordable Care Act a failure? And if it isn't, can his rhetoric, which is probably very damaging in and of itself, but more important, the actions I'd like to talk about that he's taking, can he kill this thing, even though the Congress declined to repeal it because they could not come up with a replacement? Yeah. You want to talk about that, Viola?
Yeah, so I'd like to say that from the very beginning of this administration, we've seen the language that's been used from the very beginnings kind of attacking the Affordable Care Act.
Never mentions it without mentioning, quote, failing in the phrase.
So it's been on the target list from the very beginning, not only by the new administration, but also by previous Congress, you know, trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which has done tremendous work in America providing health care.
Yeah, how many times did the House of Representatives vote to repeal this thing? Something like 65 or 70 times?
Yeah,
who's counting?
And in the current, you know, actually during the summer, we saw in the Senate several repeal bills that failed several times. We saw the Skinny repeal bill, that Graham Cassidy was the latest attack, and now we're seeing the president currently and Congress in general trying to use other means to actually sabotage the SCA. And one of the latest attack was on Thursday, October 12th, where he came up with an executive order that would do a devastating impact on SCA and the healthcare system in America.
Is that, you're talking about cutting out the reimbursement cost of the insurance company? Is that what you're referring to?
There was more to that. Could you explain, just so that we're all on the same page and our viewers, we got a lot of headlines about the copay reimbursement, but there was more to the executive order. Could you kind of enlighten us?
Yeah. So one of the in the executive order right currently, so there's a change in definition from short-term plans. So in the currently under the Obamacare, short-term plans.
Excuse me, guys. I hate to interrupt. Can we have your guests to stop tapping the table?
Tapping.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
It's just really loud.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for that. So we're seeing the language changing the definition of short-term plans from 90 days or less to a year now, and which means that could also be extended. The short-term plans that currently are available do not take into consideration the consumer protections or providing essential benefits. So by extending that period, that means it's going to allow in more people who are going to look at these plans and think, well, these plans are very affordable, and a lot of young people might flock into those plans that are really
buy a bunch of short-term plans in sequence rather than get onto a full long-term health insurance plan. Health
Exactly,
coverage plan.
and these plans really won't provide the coverage that is needed.
And
for
they
most
were
people.
designed as a bridge. You're leaving a job, you're moving to another state, you need some health coverage for your family for 3 or 4 months until you get settled into your new position. They were not, and so in order to be quick and affordable, they're kind of emergency situations, so they were not designed to be as robust as a full ACA plan on the exchange, correct?
Exactly, that's true.
So what he's saying is now you can use these more.
Yeah, you can, kind of marketing those, weakening the laws on insurance companies to sell junk plans, which could actually discriminate people with pre-existing conditions. So
Well, they say they're going to cover those, but they don't put any limit on the cost.
and there's no there are no limit caps as well. So
Essentially, the concern a lot of healthcare advocates have is that people may buy these plans thinking they have all these consumer protections that we fought really hard to have put into the healthcare law to begin with, and then they're going to find out when they're sick and need that healthcare coverage the most that they actually don't have it.
Which is the problem that we had that we tried to address with the Affordable Care Act. That was one of the major problems, was people discovering after they went in for the procedure or for the life-saving treatment that this is not covered. And you thought you've been paying your employer your share for your health insurance for 30 years, and you thought you had family health insurance.
And it's exactly that scenario where people would have spent resources to have health insurance thinking they were protected, and then to find out that either they met caps so that the insurance company wouldn't pay out anymore, or that some of these and they're called essential health benefits for a reason. They're 10 essential health benefits that all of the health insurance plans in the marketplace need to cover. And there's a reason. It's because that is what the American people need to be able to have safety and economic security when they do need to access health care coverage.
So some have said this seems to be the administration attempting to kill the Affordable Care Act by 1,000 cuts. It seems to me more like they're attempting to kill it with about 10 massive blows, withdrawing the what is it called, the CFS or
the cost sharing
thing,
yes.
Not enforcing the IRS mandate for people to have health insurance or pay a penalty, not enforcing that, ending.
And I would say the news coverage is not enforcing. That is a question mark right now, and I would just say for viewers that it is a minimum of $695 penalty if you do not purchase health insurance, and people should expect that could be enforced because the rules are not clear on it right now.
Okay.
Trump has said that has made some moves to weaken that, but the reality is right now it is in place.
Well, that's good to know, because people should not be frivolous about ignoring their obligations under the tax laws of the United States, and this is one.
And we can talk after the break why that's important, why it's important that we get the largest pool of covered individuals, why that's necessary to allow you to be able to cover pre-existing conditions, to allow you to be able to provide long-term health care for chronic conditions, and we can do that after the break.
And it's time for our break, and we hope after the break that some of you will choose to join us by dialing us at 640-3091 with your thoughts on this. There must be some people out there that think Trump is doing a good thing here. We'd love to hear from you, too.
Are you on the exchanges?
Are you on the
Is this
exchange?
going to affect you? What do you think about that?
Yeah. You want to have insurance sold across state lines? How do you think that would be good? Do you want to end the mandates for coverage of certain things? Let us know if you have an opinion on this. We'll be right back. Okay, this is the progress report for this Wednesday, October 18th. And a beautiful month of October, it certainly is in the Granite State. And if you're just joining us, we are discussing the attempts by President Trump to achieve what the Congress could not do, destroy the Affordable Care Act, sometimes called Obamacare, destroy it by various executive actions, some of which we talked about and some of which we think we should explain. Sandra, you wanted to talk about sort of the larger issue here.
Yeah,
Why don't you do that?
and actually, I'll ask Viola to talk a little bit just about picking up on a point you made earlier, Bob, is that they have, in Congress, voted several times around repealing the Affordable Care Act over several years and have never been able to do that because
Well-
it is a program that's working and that is popular.
When they had a Democratic president in the White House, Barack Obama, they knew that whatever they passed, he was not going to sign it. So they were fearless.
Or to be precise, he would veto it.
To be more precise,
Yeah.
correct. They were fearless when there was no risk. But as soon as the curtain got pulled away and they were the dog that caught the car, to use
right.
one of my favorite
Yes,
terms,
that's a good
phrases
one.
that you use, Bob,
Yeah.
all of a sudden they got the coldest feet that I've ever seen and couldn't put it together. So could you kind of walk us through the various failed efforts that they started
Yeah.
with this?
So I'll start off with this, mostly more about the skinny repeal bill that actually was another version, an attempt to, repeal SCA. And the intent behind this was basically to literally give tax breaks to big corporations and the wealthy and the very wealthy, because by cutting LCA, that the money that would be recovered from that would be going to those groups of people who already have health care, and at the same time, another big piece of this repeal bill was literally bring back discrimination for people with pre-existing conditions, which we fought with the SCA to make sure that people were covered under SCA for those conditions that they could be discriminated against because of their health situation. So that was one of the main pieces there, and we saw the attempt in the Graham Cassidy bill, for instance, Congress trying to buy off some states. They knew that this was such a terrible bill that they were trying to buy states like Alaska to give them the SCA.
They were taking money from Connecticut, New York, and other Democratic blue states, and they were shifting it.
I heard Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, not on the Graham Cassidy, but the one before that, when they were appealing, he said, this bill cannot become law. He said that. He said, this bill cannot become law. It's so terrible. And then he voted for it. That's astounding to me that he would do that. He did that, and then he came up with the Graham Cassidy thing, which you're talking about, which is, worse or equally bad, whatever.
And wasn't the argument, I'm going to vote for it so we can fix it in conference? Wasn't that where they were going with that?
It was a terrible argument, and particularly for those in a party who had consistently said you need to read the bill before you vote on it, and then to ask the American people to have their congressional delegation vote on a bill with no details, no protections for those with pre-existing conditions, no guarantee about minimum essential health benefits. And frankly, for somebody like myself who's been following and acting as a healthcare advocate and activist for several years, it is infuriating to know that there is so much time and attention put into those who are on the pro-healthcare reform side about how to make sure we craft a system that works for people, that lowers costs, that helps everyday families, and then to have these votes time and again to repeal, and there's no replacement offered.
Replacement.
They've had decades to offer a replacement. They don't have it. Sometimes,
Well, they have Romney Care in Massachusetts they could offer as a replacement.
things like there's a lot of things actually in the Affordable Care Act that are bipartisan ideas that over the years,
Well,
like
this
the
whole thing started out
marketplaces.
as a Republican idea. If I'm not mistaken, this came out of the Heritage Foundation, a right-wing think tank. And it was tried in Massachusetts, called Romney Care, and then Romney, when he became presidential candidate, that was great for Massachusetts, but not great for the nation. I mean, this is a Republican plan that we've enacted called the Affordable Care Act. We have a call.
We do. We've got Robert on the line.
Hey, Robert, I'm glad you're joining us on the Progress Report. What you got to offer?
I got some thoughts on the healthcare issues.
Please.
We'd love to hear him.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on Social Security, and I just want for people to envision what would it be like if Social Security were not there.
Right.
Okay, and I equate the healthcare aspect to be the same. It's an inherent right. We pay for it, all the while, we subscribe all the while we're working, and to abolish it is just simply outrageous. Now, I have another little comment, if you would.
Please.
Yep, sure.
Okay, I've been a Democrat all my life, and all I hear is like, don't vote Democrat because it's tax and spend, whatever. But conversely, I look at Republicans. Richard Nixon was the first guy to give us $1 trillion deficit, and those guys are not tax and spend; they're tax and keep. And after that, the deficit keeps growing and growing and growing.
Right.
But they're living on a credit card. Okay.
Yep.
Appreciate the input. Thank you very much.
Thanks for
Thanks
the
for the
call,
call.
Robert. That's a very good comment. It's interesting. The Republicans, having failed with the attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act by legislative action, although Trump's trying to do it by executive action, now we're talking about a tax reform bill, which means tax cut for the wealthy, and nobody seems to care about the impact it's going to have on our enormous federal deficit and debt.
And
But that's a subject for another show.
Yeah, and actually, right now in the Senate, there's the Senate budget resolution that will be voted on, I believe, this week on Friday. And in that resolution, there's an instruction that talks about, of course, this is basically to implement the tax plan that has been put in place. But there's no instruction that says how that would be funded. So this tax cut would actually add a deficit of 1.5 trillion. And with that, we're saying that in the long term, the plan is actually cut services that are very critical to working people like healthcare, Medicare, Pell Grants, education, food stamps. So we know that this administration is really, and Congress is not really fighting for working people. So
I don't think they're draining the swamp, Viola. That's what I conclude.
I want to.
I don't think they're doing
I want to remind folks too that we used to have a PAYGO agreement in the Congress. That anytime you were going to raise some money, you had to cut it somewhere else.
You're right.
Anytime you
Where'd
were going
that
to do a
go?
tax cut, you had to find out where's the revenue going to come from to replace it.
Yeah.
And I would point out that Democratic Congress after Democratic Congress abided by that stricture, and it made things difficult.
Yeah.
But it allowed the budget not to go where it's going to go with this latest completely unfunded. I mean, I think we kind of lost that when we got into those off-budget wars.
Yeah.
And I think we forgot to keep that rule in place. But
We certainly
we
did.
are. This is certainly not. It's really surprising, but this is certainly not what you think of when you think of Republican fiscal conservatism.
Yeah.
And I have to say to the caller's remark that these consistent attacks on the Affordable Care Act and the fact that the Republicans in Congress have not been able to offer a viable alternative, I think has actually created more of a climate for more people to come out in support of improved Medicare for all. And you're starting to see that both with
Well, we can
leaders in
hope
the
that,
Senate
but
and House.
I'm very worried. All this rhetoric is going to drive down enrollment. And if indeed the IRS, because of lack of personnel, and they're very stressed out because they've been facing their own cuts, is not able to fully enforce the requirement of the mandate, this whole thing can collapse. And I want to ask you, ladies, I don't know which one wants to answer, why is it important that we have this mandate for people to either get health insurance or have to pay a penalty through the IRS? I mean, that's something that people, I don't like the IRS. They take my money. And why is this important?
I want to
let's
phrase
talk
the
about
question a little differently. Why is it important that young, healthy people not be allowed to freeload on the system?
Yeah.
Roll the dice, and if they do
That's
get
a better way
sick,
to
they
put it.
will be taken care of.
Yeah.
Why
Well, I mean,
why are they allowed to be freeloaders even though they're adults?
We think of it as less of a mandate, more of a personal responsibility, shared responsibility provision, because of just that. None of us know when we're going to get sick, when we're going to have
But
a car
we all know
accident
we
or-
will.
yes. But
There is nobody that's going to get away in this life without having to access the healthcare system. Nobody.
And that is the one truth that we do know about it, and that's why it makes sense to pay a little bit each month to have an insurance system or another program to make sure that we're all paying in, so that when we need to draw out funds for access to health care, that it's there. And one of the things that we saw conservatives do, in addition to opposing a fair share responsibility provision, is that they actually went out, groups like Americans for Prosperity, which is funded by the Koch brothers, actually went out and hosted events where they tried to discourage young adults from signing up for healthcare coverage, even though those young adults really do need healthcare coverage to make sure that they can remain healthy in times of need.
Just like we need healthy young workers to pay into the Social Security system so it doesn't collapse and won't be there when they need it, when they're 65 or above.
I've actually heard the argument made, which defies the concept of insurance completely. Why should I pay for someone else's illness?
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of people
Why
have
should
that.
I pay to educate somebody else's kids if I don't have
It's
kids
the
in
same
school?
argument, Bob,
Same
but
argument.
I have actually heard people make that argument with a straight face.
And it's an unfortunate reality that is part of the dialogue. But I would just go back to what I was saying earlier without commenting on the policy itself. I really do think that you're starting to see a shift in American politics where, for example, improved Medicare for all used to be a conversation that not many people would engage in. And now you're having Senate leaders, including here in New Hampshire and others, start to talk about that being the next opportunity for us to ensure people really gain health care, because you have under the system we have right now, you are seeing how Republicans and the Trump administration are trying to chip away at it. So if they are serious about keeping the private marketplace we have in place right now, then they should work to make sure that it's shored up rather than chipping away at it.
And we had an opportunity to look at that with the development of the Affordable Care Act, and that was the provision that lost by one vote that would allow a public option. If you didn't want to go into the ACA marketplace, you could sign up and pay your share and get on Medicaid.
There are many ways to solve this problem for people, though. You could move to Canada. There you go. It's pretty close by. Nice, friendly country. They have health care for all. Or you can go to the United Kingdom or Ireland. And, same language, great health care.
Better outcomes.
France, I guess, has the best health care system perhaps in the whole Western world.
Better outcomes.
And I have a
per
niece
dollar
who's
spent.
become a French citizen. She's a nurse. She works in the system. She has kids that were, brought into the world with the benefit of the system. Or you can go to Germany, or you can go to Scandinavia, or Switzerland, or Italy.
Well,
You
what
can
I
go
would
to
say
any of
is
these places.
I'm in my second year of home ownership in Concord and very content where I am. And we also we need an American healthcare system that works. And we know the Affordable Care Act has expanded access. It's improved the quality of care. It's helped lower the cost curve. And what we're seeing now with all of the obstruction of the Affordable Care Act is that President Trump is starting to own it. And that's what I would say about where it goes from here is that his attempt to do death by 1,000 cuts means that he is now in the driver's seat on what happens with the Affordable Care Act. It was working great. We were working out any of the kinks that needed to be worked out. But now that he has stepped into that role, the success or failure really lands on his shoulders.
The Pottery Barn Rule,
I'd probably
right?
add on that, say that American people have spoken up, and again, going back to the repeals that have happened recently, them fighting back and voicing their opinions, how much affordable care means to everyday Americans.
We saw the spectacle of people being removed in wheelchairs from the halls of Congress
Yeah.
because they were protesting to keep their health care
Yep,
benefits.
disability rights
Yeah.
advocates talking about, and not just the Affordable Care Act in that situation, but huge drastic cuts that were being proposed to Medicaid, which is not just a healthcare program, but was really a program that allows people with disabilities to live a life with dignity, to be able to be a part of our community and to lead productive lives.
Yeah. So which of these things that the administration is doing is there really a prospect that Trump can do by executive action what couldn't be done through Congress, even with Republican majorities, solid majorities in both houses, to actually repeal and end the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare? Can he bring this down by executive action? That's what's scaring me, the cutting back on the cost sharing reduction payments, cutting back on the advertising to encourage people to sign up. The sign up period is just about to begin,
Actually, they've
and it's been
they've
cut
actually-
back, right?
they've cut down the advertisement. The advertisement. I think before the funding for advertisement was about $100 million. So they've cut that by 90%. So that's really a big way of sabotaging the system, making sure that,
So if you
that people don't know about it. That
if
the
you don't
system
know that
exists.
it's the sign up window,
Yeah.
you're going to miss it.
And then we also have, in addition to that, Sandra, we have, and everyone who's watching, we have the cutting down of navigators that have been helping people navigate this system, because it's a very complicated, not complicated, but it helps.
More complicated than it should be,
people,
but still, yeah.
in the process of enrolling. So we're seeing a 40% cut in that program. So there's so many ways that in a way, they're not bringing down the system, but they're trying, in a way, to reduce the number of people that enroll into the CA.
And these seem to be targeted right at the interface between the consumer and the system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're basically, the system's still going to be there, but if you can't get into it and you don't know where the door is or how to open the door, then all this is no
it's
good.
It's a complicated system, and what do they call them? Navigators? Is that
Yeah,
what you say?
navigators.
And I think those people are very important to the program succeeding.
And the reality is it's easy to sign up for healthcare coverage. It's trying to make the decisions between the plans, especially if you're in a situation where you haven't had to look extensively at health plans or haven't had the opportunity to look extensively at health plans in the past. And the navigators are those consumer assistance individuals who can help you help answer questions about how plans may benefit your family so that you can make that ultimate determination. But signing up for coverage is actually a pretty easy process of going to healthcare.gov
Yeah.
and going through. You fill out your information, you look at plans, and that is part of the reason why the Trump administration has targeted this particular piece of it, is because they know it's easy, they know people want to use it, and so they've cut the advertising, they've cut the time to sign up in half, literally in half, from 12 to 6
awful.
weeks.
Just plain
They're going to
awful.
have maintenance downtime on Sundays regularly.
12 hours.
12 hours during a time that is very popular for people to go on and look at plans. So all of these cuts are intended to sabotage the Affordable Care Act, and this has been a trend, frankly, all year since his administration began. The cost sharing reduction payments, the
Hasn't
latest.
been quite a year yet. We had time for a break, but we have a call come in. Let's take this
Why
call.
don't we
and then
take
go to
Phil?
the break.
We'll
Hey,
go
Phil.
quick on the call.
Phil, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. What you got for us tonight?
Hello.
Hey, Phil, go on.
Hi.
Well, hi, Mike. How you doing?
Doing
We're
well.
doing great.
It's healthcare, correct?
That's
Indeed,
the topic.
that's the subject. Yeah.
All right. Could I start with this? When all the power brokers get in a room, here's how I would like to see it start. Either the American people get what Congress has, or Congress gets what the American people have.
I like it. I'll take what Congress has any day. I would take that real quick. I bet you would too.
Yeah, pretty simple, right?
Pretty simple. Yeah, very good coverage.
Right. And I know, Clamshell Alliance and Mike Farley, liberal Democrats, which I love. I'm right in line with you. I'm
Mike and the
no way am
clamshell.
I
Huh?
called to defend Donald Trump, or I should say President Trump. Believe me, not even close.
Yeah.
But, and there's always a but, right?
I don't know. You
With-
tell me.
with
We
you,
had
Phil,
a
there's
chance with
usually a
Bernie
but.
Sanders.
Yep.
And then the super delegates, especially in New Hampshire, chose to support his opponent, which they had every right to do because that's how the rules are set up.
Yeah, yeah.
But now I don't want them crying foul that, Trump's messing up health care. Well, guess what? We had our opportunity. The super delegates also could have listened to the people and said, you know what? This is what the people want. The common everyday guy, maybe he knows what's going on or she knows what's going on, and maybe we should support Bernie Sanders and everybody could have health care and, by the way, go to college.
Phil, I think.
All the know-it-alls missed that boat.
Yeah.
Well,
So now they're
I'm with
throwing
you,
daggers
Phil.
at Trump. Well, guess what?
Mike's with you. I'm not.
Well, no, but had we supported the right candidate, we wouldn't be in this situation.
Well,
So to me, it's like sour grapes.
yeah.
You reap what you sow.
well, I got to agree
Okay.
with you
You weren't
there.
there when we needed you. We had an opportunity to cure health care from day one. Bernie was right on it. You're all getting it, just like you guys had said. Most of Europe or most of the rest of the world or the developed world.
Yeah.
We're going to take care of people.
Yeah.
Well, the know-it-all Democrats in our state, in our community, turn their nose to that. Oh, no, we're not going to do that. Well, guess what? Now you got what you got.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's not good enough for everybody.
Okay.
But to be blaming somebody else, look in the mirror and stop blaming yourself. We had a chance, and we blew it.
Okay.
Well, thanks for the call, Phil.
Thanks,
I appreciate
Phil.
you saying it.
And if and until we start looking at it that way, nothing's going to change.
Okay.
You can pass the blame all you want. You know,
All right,
here's
Phil.
a little shiny object over here, President Trump, it's his fault. No, it's not his fault. It's our fault.
Well, we got to win elections. Thanks for the call, Phil. Appreciate it.
There's the old
Well,
split between
you
you
know,
and I.
Bob, I find it very hard to
Okay.
argue with Phil's logic on this, but I know you have a different approach to it.
I have a different point of view. I mean, I really do.
Yours, we know the outcome. Mine, it's just a wish. We don't know.
It's a hypothetical. You can't know what would have happened if. That's right.
We don't know. But it's time for our break. Want to take a quick break?
Let's
We
take
can
a
regroup
quick break,
come
and we'll
back?
be right back. And thank you for our callers, and we hope more of you call in 640-3091. We are talking about the Trump assault on the Affordable Care Act and whether it can succeed. And when we get back, I want to talk specifically about what this could mean for the New Hampshire program. We really haven't got to that yet, and let's talk about that. All right, thank you, Paul. We're back. This is the third and, as always, the final segment of the Progress Report, and it's for this Wednesday, October 18th, and we're having a very lively discussion with two good, well-informed ladies to talk about the crisis in our healthcare system, and more particularly the assault by the Trump administration on the Affordable Care Act. Can they take it down, even though Trump and the Republicans in Congress could not get the repeal done because they had no replacement, and what the implications may be for that for New Hampshire? But we have a caller,
Yeah,
don't we?
Yeah, I think we got another caller. Ricky, is that you on the line?
Hey, Ricky, you got something to contribute here? We'd love to hear it.
Hi, yeah, I like your guys' show. I just
Thanks.
was going out to the panel. What's your guys' feeling about health care as far as everyone paying, let's say, a portion of their paycheck to have all insurance all the way across the board? Are you in favor of universal health care?
Are you talking about something like the health savings accounts where you put money aside and I mean, that's one idea. Is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about something else?
What are they? Well, I understand that up in Canada, for instance, it's a 30% or something like that. Everyone pays 30% no matter how much you make. So everyone's paying their fair share, if you would.
Okay.
I just want to get. I just want to get about, because you guys go back and forth a lot.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to give me your best idea of how to
fund it.
Straighten this whole thing out.
Yep.
And the length of a show. And I really appreciate your show. And I just want to get some clarification. What do you feel would be the best alternative?
Oh, great. That's
Good.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Good question.
That's a
Thanks
good
for
question,
calling.
Ricky. We can talk about
Who
that.
wants to talk about that?
I know I have my opinion, but you can guess what that is.
You know, I would say there are several different proposals out there for what a different healthcare system could look like in our country. And I think one of the challenges right now for advocates, frankly, is that we are so bogged down in trying to defend what we have right now that it's very difficult to find the time and the organizing capacity to start to move forward on some of those other ideas and to explore those more. So some people may have been committed to those over the years, but I can just speaking for my own organization. Right now, we're worried about keeping in place what we have.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of our focus has been.
Do you think there could be a silver lining that if Trump succeeds in destroying the Affordable Care Act by his rhetoric and his actions that we've talked about, that maybe the outcome could be a move to a Canadian, European style health system where everybody gets health care as of right and it's all covered through taxes? And by the way, people think, oh, that's going to be very expensive. It's going to be a lot less expensive because we are now supporting all these insurance companies that provide health care, and they all have,
who, by the way, are making money hand over fist.
They're making money hand over fist. And they all have, presidents with big salaries and, offices.
Take a drive through Hartford, Connecticut and look at the names buildings on the tops of the buildings.
Yeah.
And I ask you, if the money that goes into paying the people in those buildings and building those buildings were instead funneled back into the healthcare system, would we not have more money for the healthcare system?
Well, and I would encourage folks to take a look at the Granite State Physicians for a National Health Plan. They've been working on this issue for a number of years, and as providers themselves who see the front line and have had to go through doing insurance paperwork to determine whether or not somebody they're treating as a patient who needs certain types of care can qualify under their health plan.
Yeah, but think of all the people that doctors have to, physicians and practices have to employ just to deal with all the different forms.
Mm-hmm. So
it's really staggering.
I found their voice in this to be really interesting, and they have a lot of data, and I encourage folks to check out their website
Could you
and learn
repeat
more
the
about
name of the organization?
Granite State Physicians for a National Health Plan. I've been very impressed with some of the data they've put forward about different models.
Yeah.
And these models exist. We have them, Bob. You ticked off country after country after country, and all of them do it a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. So that we talk about the states being the incubators of democracy and coming up with the best plan. Well, we don't have to invent it ourselves.
Right.
We can explore these other circumstances that have been in effect for years, that failed for some times and improved.
And the interesting thing is, like the United Kingdom or Canada, I don't care whether the Conservatives win the election or the Liberals or the Tories or Labor, nobody ever recommends taking down their health care program. Yeah. Nobody. I don't care how right-wing the party is that wins the election, they will never be part of their platform that we're going to do away with the national health care system.
And I would say
never.
I lived in England for 5 years, and I never had to pay. If I went to the doctor, then I had to pay anything.
Yeah, my son just had
it's
a beautiful baby boy there, thanks to the National Health Care Service.
And the worry is
financial pain.
The worry is really something.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of that now myself. I had a very minor procedure, and ended up with an uninsured bill of $5,000. This is preventive. This is supposed to be preventive.
Heading off more serious
$5,000.
problems.
My God, I'm going to have to start saving for the next one right now.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is the situation right now, and that's why. Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter to me what party affiliation you have. If you're committed to expanding access to quality, affordable health care and making sure we get to the point where every American has health care that they can depend on, where they're not going to they're not one health scare away from medical bankruptcy, which used to be a huge problem in our country.
It's still, I think it was the biggest cause of personal bankruptcy in the country.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't matter who puts forward these ideas. We just need to keep moving forward on it. And what we see happening right now is that there is a large contingent in Congress and with the Trump administration that just wants to roll back. They don't have any ideas for replacement because they're not committed to the underlying value of having people have access to health care.
Well, actually, they do have some ideas, but we're running. We're rapidly. They're not good ideas.
I'm going to say valid ideas.
But we're running out of time, and
we
we have another call. We like to.
Looks like that one's gone.
That one's gone. Okay.
Well, I would like to say, and getting back to what people can expect in New Hampshire, the Affordable Care Act, it's the law of the land right now. It is going to be the law of the land. They have not been able to repeal it. And so, yay for grassroots
Yeah.
citizen activism to keep it in place. Open enrollment is November 1st to December 15th. So again,
A mere 6 weeks.
6-week period. People can go now to start looking at plans. So you can go to healthcare.gov. There's also information if you would like to sit down with a navigator. We can recommend a couple of organizations. Any of the community health centers in New Hampshire have individuals there who can help you look through those plans. And even if you're somebody who's re-enrolling, so you're currently on a marketplace plan, it's really important to go and look at the options. You might, if you've had any income changes, you might be able to qualify for different tax credits than you did in the past. And also just to make sure that the network you were using, both, the hospital you go to as well as like the prescription drug coverage hasn't changed, because while we have these insurance, you might still have the same insurance carrier you want to use. They may have adjusted their plan, as they do and have always done, on an annual basis. So we'd really encourage folks to go take a look at those plans.
With a single payer, you don't have to worry about that, though, do you?
No.
Just figured I'd put that in.
Okay.
At least not the models I've seen.
We got so much more we could talk about. We could go on
Could
for
I
another
just say
hour.
one
Go
more
ahead.
call? I think my call for this is basically to thank the governor for coming out against the cost sharing reduction payments, and
Yeah, that was good.
That was really great. But would
Because
like
it's
to
his own party, so that's a rare thing,
it
courage.
makes an impact that he's speaking up for Granite Staters and he's seeing what's happening here, and would like to encourage him to speak up against the the Senate budget resolution that's currently up for a vote this week, because that would also mean cuts to Medicaid, Medicare at some point.
Yeah.
So
Can I bring up one point that I want to
ahead.
make clear? Because we've had the president misrepresenting on several occasions what those payments are. He is characterizing these payments to the insurance company, and they are government checks written, electronic transfer, however they do it, written from the government to the private insurance companies. And he's calling them, he says these boost the dividends for the shareholders. These are adding to their skyrocketing profits. What these monies are, the government is not just shoveling money into the pockets of fat cat insurance companies. These are to help people who have paid for insurance. They have an insurance policy that has deductibles and copays, a concept that I cannot understand, but it exists. And so these people have paid for their insurance, but they can't use it because they don't have the money in their pocket to cover the deductible. So we have, in the Affordable Care Act, for those very low-income people, we have a plan that the government will step up. In addition to allowing them to get the insurance, will help them cover those copays so they can use it. That's what this money, you're not taking money out of the pockets of fat cats. You're taking money out of the pockets of the weakest in our society, the people who need it the most, and it's disgusting.
And even if the cost reduction payments don't go through, the insurance companies are mandated or required to still provide those reductions. So in the end, it's they're still doing this job. If they don't get paid, what happens?
They're
Then
going to
we
raise
see
the premiums next
and
round.
pull out of the market share, and then we see
Well, that's another
instability
whole
that's
subject
happening.
that we should talk about, is the damage to the individual insurance market via the exchanges, with the increasing premiums and the reduced number of providers and the limits on the networks that are available. That's a small part of the overall insurance market, but it's very important to the individuals who need that coverage. And that's a very great concerning thing right now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and we're lucky in New Hampshire in that our insurance carriers have already accounted for the fact that Trump may not make those payments. And so we're actually going to be, at least for this upcoming cycle, we're safe and secure, although we would encourage as well that Governor Sununu should urge the Attorney General of the state to join a federal lawsuit around making sure those payments continue. There's a bipartisan deal on the table right now in the Senate that has some strong support from Republicans and Democrats, because those who are really paying attention to how this is going to impact families in their community know that those cost sharing reduction payments need to stay in place for all the reasons Viola just laid out. But we do need to make sure that New Hampshire are protected, and so we should join that lawsuit.
Folks, we're just about out of time, and there's so much we haven't covered. We haven't even talked about the need that the New Hampshire legislature has to meet to reauthorize Medicaid expansion.
Have us back. We'd be happy to talk about that.
50,000 people risk of losing their health insurance if the legislature, not in Washington, but in Concord, does not act in this next upcoming
I
session.
have to say, Bob, there were threats back when they expanded Medicaid. Look, these payments, you can't trust the federal government. They're going to leave us high and dry. And I thought there is no way that they're going to leave us high and dry on expanded Medicaid for these people. And holy cow, it's a possibility.
It's a real
and,
possibility.
And thankfully, we haven't heard about that so much. But I would say with the Affordable Care Act and with the Medicaid expansion, New Hampshire's struggling with an opioid crisis right now, and you take away health care coverage for those
That's
individuals.
a big blow to that whole effort.
That is going to set us back more than anything else.
Yeah.
10
Folks,
seconds to close, Bob.
We're done. We're going to be back next week with another edition of the Progress Report. I know I'm going to have a wonderful candidate, a young man. Hassan Essa is going to be with us, and I believe Will Chalmers is going to be back with a talk about his recent trips to the Mideast, to Israel and Palestine. So that should be interesting. Thanks to our callers and thanks to our guests for joining us. It was a very good discussion, folks, and we hope you enjoyed it.